The wounded Zephyrian drakehound's breathing came in ragged gasps, its crystalline scales reflecting the amber glow of Vorthak's twin suns. Commander Elena Vasquez knelt beside the massive creature, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the weight of decision. The beast's 6 amber eyes, each the size of her fist, tracked her movements with an intelligence that sent chills down her spine. "Ma'am, we should fall back," Sergeant Torres whispered urgently. "The intel was wrong. These aren't just wild animals, they're coordinated hunters." Elena ignored him, focusing on the gaping plasma wound across the creature's flank. Around them, the battlefield stretched like a nightmare painting. Charred earth, twisted metal, and the bodies of both human soldiers and alien beasts scattered across the crimson landscape. The war between the Terran Federation and the Zephyrian Empire had been raging for 3 years, with these magnificent predators serving as the aliens' most feared weapons. The drakehound whimpered, a sound that seemed impossible from something weighing nearly 2 tons. Elena had seen these creatures tear through power armor like tissue paper, had watched them leap incredible distances to drag screaming soldiers into the darkness. Yet now, lying broken and bleeding, it seemed almost invulnerable. She reached into her medkit, her fingers closing around the emergency biofoam canister. The creature's eyes followed her hand, and she could swear she saw recognition there, not the blank stare of a mindless beast, but the awareness of something that understood she held its life in her hands. "Commander, what are you doing?" Torres hissed. "Something that should have been done a long time ago," Elena murmured, activating the biofoam. The white substance hissed as it made contact with the wound, sealing the plasma burns and stopping the bleeding. The drakehound's massive head lifted slightly, studying her face. Its breathing steadied, and one of its forelimbs, equipped with razor-sharp talons that could rend steel, moved slowly toward her. Elena's squad raised their weapons, but she held up a hand to stop them. The creature's talon touched her cheek with surprising gentleness, leaving no mark. For a moment that stretched like eternity, human and alien regarded each other across the vast divide of species and war. Then, from the ridge above them came the distinctive howl of a drakehound pack, but this time it wasn't a hunting cry. It was a mourning song. The wounded creature answered with a low, melodious call that resonated through Elena's bones. As the echo faded, she understood something profound had just occurred. The pack wasn't coming to attack. They were coming to retrieve their fallen member. And somehow, impossibly, they knew she had helped. "Torres," she said quietly, "I want you to document everything that happens next. Something tells me this moment is going to change everything we thought we knew about this war." The ground trembled as the pack approached, but for the first time since landing on Vorthak, Elena felt no fear, only wonder at the possibility that in a galaxy torn apart by hatred and misunderstanding, connection might still be possible between the most unlikely of allies. 3 months after the encounter on Vorthak's crimson fields, Elena found herself in the most unlikely of places, a hidden valley deep in the planet's northern continent, surrounded by creatures that were supposed to be humanity's sworn enemies. The drakehound she had saved, whom she had come to call Echo for its haunting calls, lay beside her like a living mountain of scales and muscle. Dr. Sarah Chen, the xenobiologist who had joined Elena's unofficial research mission, was documenting everything with barely contained excitement. "The neural complexity is extraordinary," she whispered, running her scanner over Echo's massive skull. "These aren't just apex predators. They're displaying behaviors I've only seen in the most intelligent species." The valley itself was a marvel of natural architecture. Towering stone formations created acoustic chambers that amplified and modified sound, turning the drakehound's calls into complex symphonies that echoed for miles. Elena had learned that each pack had its own unique song signature, intricate melodies that identified family groups, conveyed emotional states, and even seemed to record historical events. "Listen to this," Elena said, playing back a recording from her helmet's memory core. The haunting melody filled the air, and immediately every drakehound in the valley lifted their heads, their eyes focusing on Elena with what could only be described as reverence. "That's Echo's rescue song," she explained to Chen. "They've been singing it for months, not just his pack, but dozens of others. It's spreading across the continent like a legend." Private Martinez, one of the few soldiers who had volunteered to join Elena's unsanctioned mission, shook his head in amazement. "My grandmother always said animals could sense a person's true heart, but this is something else entirely." As if responding to his words, a young drakehound, barely the size of a terrestrial horse, approached Martinez cautiously. The soldier had been injured in a skirmish 2 weeks ago, and the creatures had watched with obvious concern as Elena treated his wounds. Now, the juvenile touched its snout to Martinez's bandaged arm, its eyes glowing with soft bioluminescence. "There. Empathic," Chen breathed. "Not just intelligent, they actually feel our emotions, the pain, the fear, the love." Elena nodded, her hand resting on Echo's massive neck. She could feel the creature's heartbeat, slow and steady, and somehow it seemed to synchronize with her own. Over the past months, she had learned to distinguish between the different types of calls: the hunting songs that coordinated pack behavior, the territorial warnings that established boundaries, and the bonding melodies that expressed affection and loyalty. But it was the mourning songs that had truly opened her eyes. These creatures grieved for their losses with a depth of emotion that put many humans to shame. They remembered their dead, sang their stories, and passed down their memories from generation to generation. "Command thinks we've gone rogue," Martinez said quietly. "They're demanding we return to base for debriefing and court-martial." Elena's jaw tightened. "Let them think what they want. What we've discovered here is bigger than military protocol. These creatures aren't weapons, they're partners. The Zephyrians haven't been controlling them. They've been working with them." Echo's head turned toward her, and she could swear she saw understanding in those ancient eyes. The creature had been teaching her, she realized, not just about Drakehound culture, but about the true nature of the war itself. The Zephyrians weren't conquerors seeking to dominate worlds. They were refugees, fleeing some greater catastrophe, and their bonds with the Drakehounds were forged in shared desperation and mutual protection. "We're going to change everything," Eleanor whispered, her voice carrying across the valley's natural amphitheater. "We're going to show both sides that there's another way." The valley filled with harmonious calls as dozens of drakehounds joined their voices in a song that seemed to speak of hope itself. The ancient Zephyrian archives, hidden beneath the crystalline waterfalls of Vorthak's sacred valley, revealed truths that shattered everything the Terran Federation believed about the war. Elena stood before walls of living crystal, their surfaces dancing with holographic records that stretched back millennia, while Echo's pack surrounded her in a protective circle. Kethvar, the Zephyrian diplomat who had agreed to this clandestine meeting, was unlike any alien Elena had ever encountered. Where she had expected a cold, calculating enemy, she found a being whose every gesture spoke of profound weariness and loss. His translucent skin shimmered with patterns that Elena was learning to read as emotional states. Right now, he displayed the deep purples and blues of sorrow. "Your species calls us invaders," Kethvar said, his voice carrying the melodic harmonics of his people. "But we are refugees, Commander Vasquez. Our homeworld was consumed by the Void Plague 3 centuries ago. The Drakehounds, they are not our weapons. They are our guardians, our companions, our salvation. The crystal walls pulsed with new images, vast ships fleeing a dying world, their hulls scarred by some unimaginable catastrophe. Elena watched in fascination as the records showed the first meetings between Zephyrians and Drakehounds, not in chains of slavery, but in mutual aid and protection. "The Drakehounds saved us," Kethvar continued. "When our technology failed, when our hope was lost, they gave us purpose. They taught us that survival was not about conquest, but about connection." Dr. Chen was frantically taking notes, her scientific mind racing to process the implications. "The bio-neural links," she said excitedly. "The Drakehounds aren't just partners, they're literally sharing consciousness with your people." Echo moved closer to Elena, his massive head resting against her shoulder. Through their growing bond, she could feel his emotions: pride, love, and something else. Protection. He was protecting her, just as his species had protected the Zephyrians for centuries. "But why the attacks on human colonies?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Kethvar's skin patterns shifted to show flashes of red, anger, but not directed at her. "Your military classified our refugee ships as invasion fleets. They fired first, Commander. Every battle, every death, we have only defended ourselves." Private Martinez stepped forward, his hand resting on the young Drakehound that had adopted him. "So, all this time, we've been the aggressors." "Not you," Kethvar said gently. "Your leaders, your people like you, seek only to protect your families. The Drakehounds sense this. It is why they have not killed you, despite having every opportunity." The truth hit Elena like a physical blow. The creatures that Command had painted as mindless killers were actually showing restraint, protecting their Zephyrian partners while trying to minimize human casualties. Every failed attack had actually been a mercy, the Drakehounds holding back their true devastating power. "There's something else," Kethvar said, his patterns shifting to show deep concern. "The Void Plague, it follows us. Your worlds are in danger, all of them. The Drakehounds can sense its approach. That is why they have been so agitated in recent months." Elena felt Echo's distress through their bond, a bone-deep fear that made her stomach clench. What is the Void Plague? A force that consumes worlds, leaving nothing but empty space. "We thought we had outrun it, but..." Kethvar gestured to the crystal walls, which now showed star charts with expanding dark zones. "It has found us again, and now it threatens not just the Zephyrian survivors, but all life in this sector." "How long do we have?" Elena asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Perhaps 2 years, if we are fortunate, less if it has grown stronger." Elena looked around at the mixed group. Humans, Zephyrians, and Drakehounds standing together in the sacred chamber. "Then we need to stop fighting each other and start fighting the real enemy." Echo's rumbling call echoed through the crystal cavern, joined by the voices of his pack. The sound was picked up and amplified by the chamber's acoustics, carrying across the valley and beyond. To Elena, it sounded like a war cry, not against each other, but against the darkness that threatened to consume them all. "The bonding has begun," Kethvar observed, his patterns shifting to show cautious hope. "Perhaps there is a chance after all." The abandoned mining station orbiting Kepler 442b had become the most unlikely diplomatic venue in galactic history. Elena stood in the main conference chamber, watching as representatives from a dozen worlds filed in, each accompanied by their Drakehound partners. The bond between human and creature that had started with Echo had spread like wildfire across the galaxy, creating connections that transcended species barriers. Admiral Hayes, Elena's former commanding officer, looked distinctly uncomfortable as he entered with a magnificent silver-scaled Drakehound at his side. The creature, which Elena had learned was called Star Whisper, maintained a protective stance while its eyes tracked every movement in the room. "I still can't believe I'm doing This, Hayes muttered, unconsciously placing a hand on Star Whisper's flank. 3 months ago, I was ordering bombardments on Drakehound nests. Now you're listening to what they've been trying to tell us all along. Elena finished gently. The transformation in her former commander was remarkable. The rigid military bearing had given way to something more fluid, more aware. The Drakehounds had a way of bringing out the best in people, stripping away pretense and revealing core truths. Ambassador Nixara, Kethavar's successor, entered with a grace that made the other diplomats look clumsy by comparison. Her Drakehound, partner Voidheart, was one of the largest Elena had ever seen, its scales so dark they seemed to absorb light. The creature's presence filled the room with an almost tangible sense of ancient wisdom. "The Void Plague has accelerated," Nixara announced without preamble. "Our long-range sensors detect its advanced fleet. We have perhaps 18 months before it reaches the outer colonies." Dr. Chen, now serving as the head of the Joint Xenobiological Research Team, activated a holographic display showing the approaching threat. The images were horrifying. Entire star systems reduced to empty void, their matter somehow consumed or converted into pure entropy. "We've been analyzing the Drakehound's biological responses to the plague," Chen reported. "Their neural architecture includes quantum-entangled structures that can actually perceive dimensional distortions. They've been trying to warn us about the plague's approach for years." Echo, who had remained at Elena's side throughout the wars, and in the subsequent peace negotiations, lifted his great head and released a low, harmonious call. The sound was immediately taken up by every Drakehound in the chamber, creating a symphony that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull. "They're sharing information," Elena translated, her growing sensitivity to the creature's communication, allowing her to catch fragments of meaning. "Battle strategies, defensive positions, something about convergence points?" Voidheart stepped forward, its massive form moving with surprising grace. The ancient creature touched its snout to the holographic display, and suddenly the image shifted, showing the galaxy from an entirely different perspective. Instead of empty space between stars, Elena could see streams of energy, dimensional currents that flowed like cosmic rivers. "The Nexus streams," Nixara breathed. "The Drakehounds can perceive the galaxy's hidden architecture. If we can learn to navigate these currents, we can outmaneuver the plague," Admiral Hayes finished, his strategic mind immediately grasping the implications. "But we'll need to coordinate every ship, every world, every species." Commander Torres, who had become Elena's chief of staff, looked up from his tactical display. "Ma'am, we're receiving similar reports from colony worlds across the sector. Humans and Drakehounds forming bonds, sharing abilities. Some are reporting enhanced intuition, others are claiming they can sense emotional states across interstellar distances." Elena nodded, unsurprised. She had been experiencing the same phenomena. Echo's consciousness had become so intertwined with her own that she could feel his emotions even when they were separated by light years. More remarkably, she had begun to sense other bonded pairs, creating a network of connection that spanned the galaxy. "The Drakehounds are creating a collective consciousness," she realized, "not just among themselves, but including their human partners. We're becoming something new, a hybrid species with capabilities neither of us possessed alone." Private Martinez, now a lieutenant, entered with his young Drakehound companion, both of them radiating excitement. "Commander, you need to see this. The colonies are reporting massive infrastructure projects, humans and Zephyrians working together, building something unprecedented." The holographic display shifted again, showing construction sites across dozens of worlds. Massive structures were taking shape, their design incorporating both human engineering and Zephyrian bioarchitecture, with Drakehounds providing guidance and power through their quantum-linked consciousness. "Arc ships," Elena whispered, understanding flooding through her. We're not just preparing to fight the void plague, we're preparing to evacuate entire civilizations if necessary. Echo's rumbling call carried a note of pride and determination. Around the chamber, other Drakehounds joined their voices, creating a harmony that spoke of unity, sacrifice, and hope. The galaxy's fiercest creatures had become its greatest protectors, and in bonding with them, humanity had found not just allies, but a new understanding of what it meant to be truly alive. The war was over. The real battle was just beginning. The quantum storm surrounding the void plague's primary manifestation defied every law of physics Elena thought she understood. From the command deck of the Harmony's Edge, humanity's first joint species flagship, she watched as reality itself seemed to bend and twist around the approaching darkness. Beside her, Echo's massive form was perfectly still, his consciousness merged so completely with the ship's bio-neural network that his scales had taken on the same silver-blue luminescence as the command interfaces. "All units report ready," Lieutenant Martinez announced from his position at the communications array. His young Drakehound partner, now fully grown and bonded to the ship's quantum sensors, was feeding real-time data directly into the fleet's collective consciousness. Around them, the bridge hummed with the integrated voices of human, Zephyrian and Drakehound crew members, their combined awareness creating a symphony of shared purpose. The assembled fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Sleek, human destroyers flying in perfect formation with organic Zephyrian bioships, while massive Drakehounds used their natural spaceflight abilities to serve as living interceptors. Each vessel was connected through the quantum neural network the Drakehounds had helped establish, allowing for instantaneous coordination across vast distances. "Elena." Echo's voice resonated directly in her mind, carrying layers of meaning that speech could never convey. "The final movement begins. Are you ready to sing the last song?" She nodded, her hand resting on the bio-neural interface that would link her consciousness to every bonded pair in the fleet. 3 years ago, she had been a simple soldier following orders. Now, she was something unprecedented, a human Drakehound. Hybrid consciousness, capable of perceiving and influencing the fundamental forces that governed reality. Admiral Hayes's voice crackled through the communication system from his position, commanding the evacuation fleets. "Harmony's Edge, the last of the refugee ships are through the dimensional gateway. Whatever you're going to do, now's the time." Elena closed her eyes and let her consciousness expand through the network. She could feel every human heart beating, in sync with their Drakehound partners, every Zephyrian mind contributing its unique perspective to the collective solution. The network now spanned dozens of star systems, linking millions of bonded pairs in a web of shared consciousness that pulsed with unified purpose. "Dr. Chen, confirm the resonance calculations," Elena called out, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been purely human for months. "Confirmed," Chen replied from her position at the quantum analysis station. "The void plague operates by consuming dimensional stability, but the Drakehound's quantum entanglement creates pockets of fixed reality. If we can amplify that effect, we can create a dimensional anchor," Elena finished. "Something the plague can't consume, because it exists in multiple quantum states simultaneously." The void plague's advance fleet emerged from the storm, like nightmares given form, dark shapes that seemed to eat light itself, leaving trails of absolute nothingness in their wake. Elena could feel the collective fear ripple through the network, but it was immediately met by waves of Drakehound courage and determination. "Begin harmonic resonance," Eleanor commanded, and throughout the fleet every Drakehound lifted their voice in unison. The song that emerged was beyond anything Eleanor had experienced before. It started as a low, thrumming bass note that seemed to come from the very fabric of space-time itself, then built into a complex symphony that incorporated the quantum frequencies of reality's underlying structure. Through the network, Elena could feel the song spreading outward, carried by the bonded pairs scattered across the galaxy. On distant worlds, humans and drakehounds added their voices to the chorus. In refugee camps, Zephyrian children sang alongside their adopted human families. In research stations, scientists wept as they felt the mathematical beauty of the universe revealed through pure sound. The effect on the Void Plague was immediate and startling. As the harmonic wave reached the Dark Fleet, their advance faltered. The absolute nothingness that defined them began to fluctuate, solid matter bleeding through the quantum gaps created by the Drakehound's song. "It's working," Chen shouted over the growing chorus. The plague entities are being forced into a single quantum state. They're becoming vulnerable to conventional weapons. Eleanor felt Echo's consciousness merge even more deeply with her own, their combined awareness expanding to encompass the entire battle space. Through their shared perception, she could see the deeper truth. The Void Plague wasn't truly alive, but it wasn't entirely dead either. It was something that existed in the spaces between realities, feeding on the collapse of quantum probability into fixed outcomes. The song isn't destroying them, she realized. It's healing them. They're not invaders, they're wounded aspects of reality itself, trying to return to wholeness. The harmonic resonance reached a crescendo, and suddenly Eleanor could see the Void Plague's true nature. They had once been entities of pure creation, builders of worlds and nurturers of life. Some cosmic catastrophe had inverted their nature, turning them into destroyers, but the Drakehound's song was offering them a path back to their original purpose. Across the network, Elena felt a collective understanding dawn. The battle wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about restoration. The bonded pairs throughout the galaxy sang not a war cry, but a healing song, offering the plague entities a chance to remember what they had once been. The Dark Fleet began to change, their consuming void filling with light and color. Where there had been nothingness, new stars began to shine. The quantum storm dissipated, revealing a sky full of nebulae that pulsed with the rhythm of creation itself. Eleanor, Echo's mental voice carried infinite tenderness. We did it. We sang the first song of the new age. Through the network, Elena could feel the joy and wonder of millions of bonded pairs as they witnessed the birth of something unprecedented. A galaxy where different species weren't just coexisting, but actively creating new realities together. Chitra, war was over. The healing had begun, and in the space between human ambition and Drakehound wisdom, a new form of consciousness was taking its first steps toward an unimaginable future.